Okay, good morning. So we're going to finish off in Mitzvah Hashem Shin Tes Zayin today, the halachas of Tzeidah, talking about domesticated animals and pets and things like that. How does that work? And Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow, please God, we'll start Shin Yud Zayin, which is the halachas of Kashira v'Aniva, making knots and bows and things like that. And then onto Shin Yud Ches, which is Bishul. So some good stuff coming up. Okay, let's go. Sif base, the last sif in Shin Tes Zayin. Chaim va'oif shebirshusai mutalot sudan. An animal, a chaya and an oif in your rishus, you are allowed to trap them. V'hu shaloyim roidu, so long as they're not rebellious animals, they're domesticated. Avalim heim moirdim. If, however, they are rebellious animals, also the tofsam afilu b'chotze, you can't contain them, even in your own chotze. Ma chotze gadol, if the chotze is large. She'em lo gadol bein bnei adam ha'yitzrichim utzuda, because if it wasn't she'em lo gadol bein bnei adam, if it wasn't sort of raised amongst people, then you would need to trap it. Okay, let's just stop there and do the Mishnah Berurah on that. So says the Mishnah Berurah Nun Beis Chayav Oif Sheb'Rishusay. So it doesn't only mean a Chayav Oif, Koilel, it includes Kol Minei Baalei Chayim, any type of animal she'erginim be'beisay v'nasu bnei tarbus, that is, it is kept as a pet and it becomes domesticated. So muta, says the Mishnah Berurah, Nun Gimel Hainu Afilu Bachutz. You are allowed to trap them, even bachutz, even outdoors. V'atam, and the reason is, Kiven Shehem Bnei Tarbus, since they're domesticated and they're used to living in the house, and therefore they're going to sort of, they'll return home in the evening, even if they may wander out during the day. And it's quite straightforward to just catch them. And therefore they're not really sort of wild and need trapping. They're considered trapped already when they're out and about. As long as you don't take them with your hands. We've already discussed this before, because Baalei Chayim, animals, generally speaking, are mukta. But it means without touching them, you sort of chase after them and you get them in a confined place. Interestingly, if you look at 88, what about Baalei Chayim generally are considered mukta. However, what about animal hair? You've got some, let's say, some pet hair on your couch or on your chairs. So he says here in 88, interesting, without just sort of without moving them, without touching them, Shabbos. It could actually be muta to move the hair itself. Okay, let's move on. Nun Hey Godel says, so this is going on, but if the courtyard is large, but if the courtyard is very small, because if it's a small courtyard, it's already considered court, and if it's in the courtyard, then it's definitely court already. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nun Zayin Hainu, Nun Vav Hainu now that it's reared amongst people, you don't really need a trap to get it, because the animals come back of their own accord every evening. However, if the animal is a bit rebellious, and it's not easy to catch them, and you've got a very large courtyard, if it's a large courtyard and the animal's a bit rebellious, then it could be at least a drabonon of tzeidah. Okay, so that is the mechaba. Then says the Ramah, top of the page now. So there are those who say that it's prohibited to trap an animal or a chay or an oaf in your rishus. V'im tzadon, and if you do potter, then there's an issa drabon. It's part of also. Avol par of a sus, but a cow and a horse for kolshkein shachai v'oif shemardu, which are more sort of temperamental and harder to contain. Im tzadon chayv chatos. That would be more problematic, and there'd be a chiyuv chatos. V'chein ikka, and that seems to be the main opinion. Chatul, a cat, dina kasha chaya. For also the tofsa b'Shabbos, and it will be prohibited to catch those animals on Shabbos. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Nun Zayin Da'osa. Hainu. Kashem Bachutz, if they are outdoors, or even if they're indoors in a large house, and therefore they're still lacking in being trapped. I.e., that you can't just in one lunge, you can't get the animal. As we defined in the beginning of the simon. And the poskim paskin like this that also lotzud. And if the birds, you've got chickens, let's say, and they go outside, and you're worried, you don't want them to be stolen. After also, even though you can't take them with your hands, if younger children trap them, they're doing you a favor, they want to bring the chickens inside, then you don't have to protest against that. And if you're worried they're going to get stolen, again you can tell a non-Jewish person to ask him to bring the chickens inside. Because the whole Seder itself is a drabanon, and asking the non-Jewish person to do it is a shvus to shvus. Not only that, you could actually stand in the way. Let's say you've got a doorway and the chicken is wanting to go out, you can stand in the doorway to prevent escape. So inevitably the animal will go back, will turn around and go back into the house. You can sort of push the bird from behind to move it to get it into the house. Because they can't say the Gemara, because when it goes into the house, it's still lacking being trapped because it's in a large house. It doesn't squirm away. That as soon as you try and get it, it just sits down and is very docile. With those types of animals which are so docile, they just sort of very obediently come to you, or they sit down. Then if they're so domesticated, if your pet is so obedient, so if the pet is so obedient that it listens to you and it will sit down, or it would be directed by you, then you're allowed to take it into even a cage or a small kennel. So that, of course, has important bearing. It depends very much on how domesticated and obedient your pet is. Nunches lotzud, also lotzud chayv v'oif shebrishusoi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you've therefore got to be careful not to bring in oifos from the house. If you've got chickens, let's say in a large chotzer, and you want to then take it into the cage, you've got an issue of seder. Or mikri seder gemura, because the cage is of course narrow, and therefore it could be an issa of proper seder, because till now it was in a very large chotzer and it was untrapped. If your intention to bring it into the cage, in the kennel or whatever, is that it shouldn't do damage in the house, if the chickens are new, they're not domesticated yet, they're untrained, then there would be an issa. If you look at 92, he says, if you're not sure if they're domesticated, that if it's a large house and you want to shut the door, then that's okay, because you're not really trapping them if you're not sure if they're domesticated. Your intention is not for trapping, because your intention is just that they don't get lost or stolen. Because it could be that they're already domesticated, in which case there's no problem at all. Carrying on the bottom there, last line of the Mishnah Berurah. And in the situation where there is a seder problem, if they go into the kluv, the kennel or the cage of their own accord, then it will be prohibited to lock the door behind them or close the door behind them. Bifneihem. Okay. However, a horse and a cow. The kolshkein chayav oif, we said there could be a chi of chatzas involved. There could be a deraisa. Pirush. The par of a sus shein minei behemoths lo shaykh tzedek klal afilu midrabanan afilu kono isol mechodesh v'adayin lehugul lova beisai ki ein asuyin lishamit mitachas idei adam. But generally speaking, a para and a sus, which are types of animals where it's not really shaykh tzeda, you don't trap the cow, and they're generally quite obedient. Ein asuyin lishamit mitachas idei adam. They don't sort of squirm away. But other types of animals that do run away and keep away from you, even though you don't need some sort of net to trap them, because they come home every evening. For those types of animals, there could be an issa tzeda drabanan. That's if they're not rebellious. But if they are rebellious, even a par and a sus who are generally obedient, then there would be an issa to capture them. Even if they raised, initially in your house. That's talking about where the par of a sus are rebellious. They run away. You need some sort of net to capture them. Or some other strategy. And they won't necessarily return home in the evening. If you look at 98, what about if you've got an animal, which there is an issue of tzeda, and you want to entice it back into the house by putting food out? So says the footnote in 48, in 98, that you're enticing your animal to come home. By putting food out, it will be easy to take it, it will be easy to capture it. Histapik agon Shlomo Zalman Orach. Shlomo Zalman was mesupik about that in Asa. Putting food out is not called a ma'aseh tzeda. Okay? And therefore when it's eating, it's as if it's asleep. And there's no problem of taking an animal which is sleeping. So therefore, he's mesupek. That maybe you shouldn't do it ideally. If the animal is rebelled and you can't get it back, and the only way to do so is to put food out, then l'chera that would be mutter. Okay, let's just finish off. Sivkot and Samach. The kolshkein shemordu. Ma'iri gamkein shemordu baruchu. They rebel and they're running away. And these animals don't come back in the evening. Ela lonin basode. They live in the field. Ka'avza or bar avza, like types of geese. Shelonin alamayim, that they live near water. V'koshel atavsam b'lim mitzuda v'tachbula. And without putting nets out, it's very hard to capture them. V'gama mechaber moed debezeh chayav chatas hatoyd naneson. Those types of animals, the mechaber would agree that there's a chi of chatas. V'kosu achronim, the mizen nilmoed. We can learn from here. You buy new animals, new geese, which you have not reared. And they're not domesticated yet. If they go out, you can't bring them back into the house. Let them, and they're grazing in the rubbish heaps or whatever. If you trap those types of animals, you're chayav, because they're undomesticated, and that would be a problem of tzeda. And if they leave your house, then that could be an issa d'oraisa, and therefore getting a non-Jewish person to do it is a problem. If, however, the house you want to bring them back into is large, and you can't get it in one swoop, which is the definition of tzeda, because him bringing it back into the house, you haven't done a ma'aseh tzeda. It's still untrapped, and therefore b'makom tzeda that could be allowed. And if kids are chasing the animals back into the house, again you have to protest against them. Okay, and then lastly we said, what about a chatul, a cat? Dina kashar chaya, says the Mishnah Berurah Samach Aleph Rotzolema, the ain dina kabehema ela kachaya v'oif. It's got a din of a chaya v'oif. V'yesh ba'al kol prati din isa tzeda kamei bohem, and therefore the same rules apply to them. So in short, if you've got an animal, you've got to be very aware of tzeda. It depends very much on how domesticated and obedient the animal is. But if the animal is very obedient and domesticated, then there'll be no problem. it'd be okay. And I would imagine most domestic animals and pets would be under that category. But if they're not, then then as per above, one has to be aware of these halachas. Seder. Okay.